Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm one of your co-hosts, Rico.
I am your other co-host, Tony Borrego.
And this is the podcast known as Relatively Sound, the podcast that spins the black circle. Today, Tony and I are going to be talking about our record store day experience from 2 Saturdays ago. We went to record store day, different record stores. I went to the one where I live in California. He went to the one nearest him in Washington. And yeah, we're just going to kind of explain our, what happened, what records we got, what records we didn't get. And yeah, it's just going to be a fun little kind of recap episode based on record store day. Tony, this was your first record store day. Is that correct?
Yes, this is the first one that I have actually participated in.
Because I would say before I moved, about 7 years ago, 8 years ago, you kind of were starting to get into records. I know I got you and Tessa into records, but you kind of more over the recent years have really started to kind of start collecting again and listening more. Is that correct?
Yes. I'm trying to get back into it just because being a musician and just someone who enjoys music, there's no reason not to kind of, just really immerse myself with it and listen to, high quality audio. And records are really engaging, and that's what I like about it. It's something to get kind of passionate about. And trying to get better and listen every day. I've been kind of slacking, but you have got me on the train.
Yeah, we've kind of mentioned our experience with records in past episodes, and we'll probably have an episode in the future where we talk mainly about records, but this is more about Record Store Day, which, if you're not aware, Record Store Day is an event that started in 2007, where pretty much record stores, especially like local independent record stores, would host little events, usually in April, and it'd be a day where bands would release specific records for Record Store Day, and you would go to your local record store and wait in line and pick them up. And sometimes they would be exclusive for Record Store Day. So sometimes there were only small pressings of certain records. Sometimes they're kind of fun releases. Like, it's not usually just like a normal album. It's usually like a band maybe doing a covers album, or especially a live album, or an EP full of, cover songs or bonus unreleased songs, B-sides. And every year since 2007, it's gotten bigger and bigger, mostly because the number of people who have started buying records in the last decade have really risen. And, that's kind of thanks to certain musicians out there like Jack White. He's always promoting vinyl, but even people like Taylor Swift, she had a Record Store Day release this year. And it was very apparent at my record store that most of the people in line were Taylor Swift fans waiting for her, waiting to buy her special Record Store Day release. So I would say every year is getting bigger, which is kind of fun, but then kind of hard because it's harder to get the records you want. But it's kind of was something that was started so that, local record stores could get more business, because nowadays it's very tempting to buy records through Amazon online only, or to go to even stores like Walmart and Target. They sell records now, and it kind of hurts the local record store businesses. So the Record Store Day is kind of, the goal of it was to kind of drive people to the record stores. So I participated in it, I would say, over the last 10 years. Not always. I don't always get something, though. Like, it really depends, because every year they release a list, like months before. Because they also do Record Store Day, too, on Black Fridays, but I don't usually go to that one. Usually the big main day is the one in April. And they release a list of what's going to be released for Record Store Day. And I look at the list, and if there's a couple items that I really want to get, then I'll usually go. If there's not, I will still go to my record store on Record Store Day, but I probably won't buy any of the exclusive items for Record Store Day. I'll just go browse the normal selections and get something there. But this year there was actually quite a bit that I wanted, and I know I gave you the list. What were the items that you were wanting to get this year, Tony?
So the one big item that I had to have was Scott Weiland's 12 Bar Blues, his first solo record on the first vinyl release. Two LP, one's blue, one's green. Pretty cool stuff. With bonus tracks on it. I was really excited because that record was part of my upbringing. I'll say very important to me. So that was the one that I was really wanting, and then some of the other things that I was kind of eyeing were Police's Stuart Copeland. He had some solo work under his name. He uses Clark Kent, LOL. Um, and then I kind of wanted to get this T-Rex record as well. I don't know if it was kind of like a compilation, but it came on pink vinyl too, which is just kind of fun. Um, but really, the only one I was really wanting was the Scott Weiland. What about you now? Because I remember you kind of had a little bit of a long list of picks that you were eyeing.
Yeah, this year there was a lot of ones that I wanted, and then even some that I would kind of want. The one I wanted the most, the two that I wanted the most was Pearl Jam released for this record store day a live album that they had recorded in 1998 called Give Way. And I guess it's a funny history with that album. They were supposed to release the live album in 98 after Yield came out. They did a show in Australia when Jack Irons was still drumming for them on that tour before he ended up leaving the band and Matt Cameron joined. And they were like, we're going to release the CD of it and the vinyl of it. And then for some reason, last minute, they decided not to the point where there are some original CD copies from 1998 that you can find and buy online that are kind of rare now. But I guess after all these times, specifically this year, celebrating the anniversary of Yield, they decided to release it properly for the first time ever, on CD again and on vinyl for the first time ever. So that I knew I had to get. It's just a standard black two LP release, but I'm as a massive Pearl Jam fan, it was like no brainer, especially because it's my favorite era of Pearl Jam, which was their 1998 Yield album. Um, and then the second one I really, really wanted to get was they reissued Warren Zevon's last studio album, titled The Wind, as the last album he released before he passed away. And it's an album that I've been liking more and more over the years as I've been getting into his music more. And it has my favorite song of his on it called Keep Me in Your Heart, which is such a beautiful song, especially having to do with the circumstances of him passing away. So I knew I had to get that on vinyl. So those are the two I wanted the most. There was a Billy Joel live album from right before he released Turnstiles, so way back in the day, that I kind of wanted to get. There was a U2 single that I didn't really need, but was like, if I see it, I'll probably get it. And then something I should mention, every year for Record Store Day, there's usually an ambassador or two. Usually a band or musician and artist will be that year's Record Store Day ambassador, meaning that they'll post all about Record Store Day on their social media. And they'll usually release a specific Record Store Day release only on Record Store Day that year. And this year it happened to be Jason Isbell and Amanda Shires, and they did an EP. I think it like contained two original songs and I think two covers, if I'm correct about that. And I did want to get that one as well because I'm a huge Jason Isbell fan. He has a new album coming out in a couple months that I'm really looking forward to. So yeah, I had a good long list, and it it was kind of an unsuccessful year for me, but it was a weird year. So let's kind of recap. Tony, where did you go for Record Store Day this year?
So I went to Silver Platters. There's one not too far from where I'm at, so it's kind of the go-to. I don't know too many different record shops, to be honest. But that's the one I go to because I know you go there. Well, when you lived here, my friend Steven, who's also really into vinyl, and he's actually who I went with. He goes there a lot too, so it was kind of a no-brainer. So that's where we went. And you said you went to a fairly small record store, right? No?
Yeah, because unfortunately, the closest record store to where I live is kind of half record store, half music store, half clothing, kind of hand-me-down store.
Oh,
Literally half the store is like clothes, and like that type of thing. And then like the other side is like CDs, DVDs, records. So their selection isn't huge. And I'd have to drive a good amount a distance to go to like any bigger store like Amoeba. Um, so, but that my local record store does participate in Record Store Day. They do get the new releases. So, and the last couple of years that I've gone there, the line was long, and I just knew if I got there when the store opened at 11 o'clock, I was going to be like really far in the back of the line. So I went with Lindsay, and we're like, let's try to get there an hour before. Let's get there at 10. We got there at 10. The line was we were about 50th in line, 50 people in front of us. The line went down the side of the building and wrapped around the corner of it. That's how long the line was.
Wow.
And again, it was mostly because there was a lot of people there for the Taylor Swift release. Just because she has a huge fan base. And I don't know if it's like exclusive Record Store Day release, but I think it might be. And that's something we'll talk about maybe in a future episode, because there are a lot of people who buy records that don't necessarily even listen to them. They just like to buy them to have them. And I just read a study the other day, not a study, but I guess an article that states that about half of the people who buy vinyl these days don't even own a record player, which is kind of crazy. But
That is actually crazy.
um yeah, so the line was long for me, and I got there an hour before. You got there. What time did you get to your? Because I think both our record stores open at 11. Correct?
Yeah, I might opened at the same time because I were getting play-by-play updates from each other, which we'll get into that a little bit later. But I think I showed up. I picked up Steven like an hour before. We got coffee. It was just a kind of a fun morning, and we got to the store. Steven, despite being a fan, fan of vinyl. He usually worked on Record Store Day, but he called out for me. So we showed up probably 30 minutes early, and there was a line, I should rephrase that. There was a group of people hovering around the door, the entrance. So we kind of just waited in the car until some sort of line formed, until like staff kind of made it kind of clear what they wanted. And then we hopped in line maybe like 15 minutes before they actually opened. Yeah, it wasn't too bad. It was roughly what I was expecting. So yours sounds a lot more overwhelming. Um,
Yeah, and I think it's mostly because there's not. That's like the only record store in town. Like it's like again, the closest record store to us is probably like twice the distance than this one is. So everyone that lives around the same area had to go to the same one because there's not many options. Where I know where you live, there are more options, not that much farther away from the record store you went to. Which shout out to Silver Platters, it's one of my favorite record stores. Anytime I go to Washington to see my family, see you, I always go to Silver Platters because I think they have some of the best selection.
and the location we go to is they're really nice there, and they're really cool guys.
Yes. With my record store, it's kind of the opposite. The people who work there, because it's like half clothing store, half music store, you can tell like some of the people there, like probably they seem kind of annoyed that Record Store Day was such a huge thing and that the line was so long. So they let us in at 11 when the doors open. And I was still probably outside 20 minutes, at least 10 to 20 minutes after the doors open, because they were only letting part of the line in at a time, because they knew if they let the whole line in at the same time, they'd be crowding the entrance and exit and crowding the area where the cashiers are. So they would kind of wait until the line was like, a certain amount of the line was in the doors. And then they stop people at the door and say, wait here. So they were only letting in some of the line at a time. And I literally was in line for over an hour and a half before Lindsay and I got up to the counter where they had the Record Store Day exclusives. It sounded like, because we were texting each other, like you said, updates. It sounded like you were able to get your records way before I did.
Yeah, we got in at a good time. They definitely did monitor the door, but like I said, we weren't really rushed to stand in the line outside. Um, So I mean, it worked out good. Everything went smooth as far as getting into the store. As far as getting the records I was looking for, that's a different story. Even though we were there early and there wasn't that many people, the like I said, the first one I was looking for, the Scott Weiland, that one was gone. So was the Stuart Copeland and the T Rex. So kind of like you were saying, it wasn't the most successful record store day.
But
Um,
what did your record store have? Okay, because our record store last year, when or 2 years ago when I went, last year I didn't go because I was working that day, unfortunately. But 2 years before when I went, I got in line and you were able to get two items at a time, two record store day exclusive items, two new releases. And if you wanted to get more, you had to go back at the end of the line and pretty much, just people could get back in line, but you had to go back in line to get more. This year, they only let you get one item at a time. So thankfully, Lindsay came with me because I wanted like at least 4 or 5 records, and I only walked away with two. And there were a couple like so. I got the Pearl Jam and the Warren Zevon. Those are the two I wanted the most. They had the Billy Joel one there, the live concert that I wanted, but when we got out of line after we got our those two records, the line was still out the door, and I'm like, I'm not waiting another hour and a half to get in line to be in line to get back to the front to find out the Billy Joel I wanted sold out. So unfortunately, the way they policed it was terrible, and I feel like probably a lot of people walked away not getting what they wanted. Did your store have a limit per customer?
I actually do not know. I mean, of course, I mean,
Well,
there, I,
how did yours work? 'Cause, really quick, ours was like a table, and they had 4 crates worth of record store exclusive, which is really not that much because one, they probably didn't have everything on the list because there's probably 100 different releases this year. 100 different bands release a record store day exclusive item, but they got multiple copies, obviously, of the more popular ones. Like 5 minutes, the store being open, a lady came out and told the crowd, if you're here for the Taylor Swift, it's already sold out. So they probably only got like 10 or less copies of it. The Pearl Jam, they had two by the time I got to the front of the line,
oh
and they
wow.
had two of the Billy Joel, which was surprising. But um, my store only had 4 crates worth, which is really not a lot when you think about all the different releases this year and having multiple copies of some of the releases. It sounded like your store had way more copies, right?
Yeah, so ours also did have like, a small little table kind of near the front. But we had, just kind of guessing like probably like 10 crates.
Yeah, twice the amount that we had, more than twice.
That being said, a lot of them did get sold out pretty fast. The only ones that didn't get sold out super fast that like, that I noticed because I kind of knew they were out there where we had a lot of Pearl Jam left. By the time you went up to you got to your table like an hour in or whatever, we still had plenty of Pearl Jams. And then there was still plenty of Taylor Swift, even though Steven and I were also anticipating, that to be one of the biggest draws. But it's kind of funny because we were talking about that. And then as soon as we walked in, like, what I noticed was like a bunch of like older dudes going for all the classic rock records, like the Grateful Dead and stuff. And I was like, okay, these are more our people actually. But
Yeah,
no, they had
yeah,
a lot of the highly sought after records. It was actually kind of the ones that I didn't think had as much demand that were all gone, which
well,
I mean
it
makes sense.
it makes sense because you know Pearl Jam is probably the most popular in Washington, right? Seattle.
Oh,
So
duh,
it
yeah.
makes sense that they probably knew that was going to be the most sought after one. And Taylor Swift is popular in every state; like she's popular everywhere in the world. So because your record store is just a bigger store than mine and just has more records in general, more of a variety, they probably were able to just, you know, buy a bigger amount of records for record store day. And they were probably smart and knew we're going to sell out the Taylor Swift pretty fast in the Pearl Jam. So let's order. They probably got a whole crate of just those two records alone.
Oh, pretty much, yeah. Like that's pretty accurate.
Where my store only got like probably 5 of each of those two records. And then I don't. I think my store probably just didn't have some at all. Like I don't. I would not be shocked if my store didn't get the Scott Weiland record at all, or the T Rex at all, or you know. I know you said too. Your friend, he was looking for the Cure one, right?
Yes, he loves the Cure. It's his favorite. And yeah, they didn't have it. And he was kind of he wasn't surprised, and fortunately it wasn't one that he was like dying to get because he's got a lot of their stuff. He's a big collector. Um but it's so funny because that's his go-to store. He walks in the store and we both go in, and one of the workers that knows him and stuff is like, Steven, sorry, we're out of the Cure. Like the first thing he says when he greets him.
So that means
Um,
they had it at least. They probably just, unlike the Pearl Jam and Taylor Swift, they probably only got probably a handful of copies. Is my guess.
yes. Oh, and actually, I have a question for you. Maybe you'll know the answer. So when we got there and we were getting in line, the people at the very front of the door, like especially like before the line was like formed, like when it was just people just mobbing around, some of the staff were like handing out papers to people. Was that just a list of the releases, or like is that a normal thing?
Well, I'll tell you what I know. I know at Amoeba, which is one of like the most well-known record stores, at least in California. Um, I know a couple years ago, and maybe they still do this nowadays on Record Store Day. And I've never been. I've only been to Amoeba once on Record Store Day, and I didn't even get there when they first opened up, so I didn't even really partake in the Record Store Day exclusives. But I know in the past, people will go to Amoeba. I know this year on their Twitter, they posted that someone was already waiting in line 6 p.m. the day before.
Jesus.
There was already a 100-person line probably by midnight. Um,
No way.
yeah, people camp out overnight. It was like buying tickets back in the day to see like Bruce Springsteen or U2. And I know in the past what they would do is they'd give everyone a list that had all of the exclusive items for that day, that record store day, and you were able to pick like I think your top two or three that you wanted, and you put like a check mark next to the ones you wanted, and that meant that you would guarantee those top three. So like when you got in the store, I think you would hand the person the list, and they would grab those your top three for you, and then I think if you wanted to buy any more, you had to go back in line, which I think is super nice. Like when I got to the front, I had no idea what was left over. The people at America Store like did not care. Like, I didn't even bother asking them, do you happen to have this one left? Because they would have just told me, you'll have to just look through the bins and see. Where a big record store like Amoeba, they have it really organized because they know it's going to be chaotic. So there's a chance your record store actually might have um, had the list and were telling people to circle the one or two that they wanted the most. That way they could get the line moving faster, which is probably why your line did move faster than mine. Because mine, there was no limit, like a time limit. So even though you were only allowed one record, people at the front of the line would take 5 minutes to look through each bin, each four bins, which isn't that much, but I mean, it's a bin full. So there's a good amount of records still to figure out what one they wanted. Because they kind of knew once they walked away, they probably weren't getting back in line, which I think is sucky because, again, I wanted at least four different records that day. There's probably a ton of people who wanted way more than that. So, um, yeah, I don't like the way my record store did it at all. It sounds like your record store did it way better.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad. It it was it. I'm kind of a passive person, and not that people were being jerks, but they all kind of just hoard around the boxes, a little pushy, because they want to get the records. You can't really blame them too much. But after like a few minutes, or maybe after like 10 minutes, I peeked in right away, and then I just kind of left because I didn't see what I wanted. But then a staff came out, and he's like, "What are you guys looking for?" And then they would ask, and he'd be like, "Okay, we're all out," or "No, it's in this box."
Yeah,
And
at least they
that
were
made it so
organized.
much easier. And then I was like, okay, well, that's everything I wanted. Let me just look around the rest of the store while I was waiting for you. Do you want to go ahead and explain that situation?
Yeah, so pretty much like Lindsay and I were in line. We had finally gotten it inside the store, but an hour had passed and we were still like in the middle of the line in the store. And by that time, you had texted me and said, "Oh, they didn't have the record I wanted. They didn't have the Scott Weiland record." So you had told me like, oh, I'm probably gonna get the Pearl Jam one for myself because I had kind of convinced you a week prior to get it if they had it for yourself because you like Pearl Jam and I think it's a good release.
Yeah, I like
And
Pearl Jam enough to warrant getting it, and because I did want to get at least something from Record Store Day,
yeah, you want to get at least a you have to if you're going to a
one
record store day,
exclusive.
you have to get something. Yeah, I mean even if it's not exclusive, even if you just went and browsed their normal collection, you still got to record store day is kind of like a national. It's like national record store day. It's almost like National Hot Dog Day. You're gonna go have a hot dog, right? Um,
Right. And you know what's actually kind of funny is that because I was browsing around is I actually did pick up a previous Record Store Day release. It was the Harold and Maude soundtrack. It was on yellow vinyl and it didn't have all like the little like soundtrack little excerpts, you know. It was just the songs from it. So I was like that's kind of cool getting a different Record Store Day release on Record Store Day.
yeah, I've done that before too. Um, but yeah, so we were in line still waiting. An hour had passed, and I think you were about ready to leave because you're like, okay, I got whatever I'm gonna get. I didn't get the one I really wanted. And Lindsay told me she's like, text your brother and see if they have any of the ones you're wanting, like the Pearl Jam, the Warren Zevon, the U2, or yeah, the U2, the Jason Isbell, Billy Joel. So I texted you, and you're like, let me look. And you're like, yep, they have the Jason Isbell still. They have the Pearl Jam still. Um,
Was
they
it
have the
the
Warren Zevon.
it was that one I also momentarily picked up for you?
Yeah. So then Lindsay was like, well, just have them pick them up for you and hold on to them. That way they run out at your store. You have a copy for me. That way, when Lindsay and I get to the front of the line, if they don't have the ones I want, you could purchase them for me. I'd pay you back, and then you would ship them to me, or I whatever. It's not that hard to ship records. It's just kind of a pain in the butt, but it's people ship records all the time. So I was like, yeah, I mean, I definitely wanted to buy them myself just because it's more fun, and I wanted to have them right away to listen to when I get home. But I was like, if my record store just doesn't have the ones I want or they sold out, I still want these records. So I had you check the ones for me. Like I said, your store had all the ones I wanted except for the Billy Joel. So I was like, well, if you could just wait until I get to the front of the counter, and then if my store has the ones I want, I'll buy those, and you don't have to buy them for me. You were pretty much like Plan B. You were my backup plan. So
And I felt a little I felt a little bad because I mean I only had picked up one release for myself from the exclusives, the Pearl Jam, but I was holding like two copies of the Pearl Jam and then like two or three other like releases. I felt kind of bad. I was like, I hope people don't think I'm like hogging, you know, trying to
yeah, but
take
your
over.
store, if they allow you to get as many copies, that's the deal. It's not like you were gonna buy them and then sell them at a higher price on eBay, which a lot of people do for record store day. That's the downside of record store day.
Right. Yeah, it wasn't shady at all. And I ended up, you know, because you were able to find most of the ones you wanted, I was able to put them back and it wasn't a big
Yeah,
deal.
because I got to the front of the line about an hour and a half after 11 o'clock when the doors had opened, and they had two Pearl Jam, they had the Warren Zevon, but they also had the Billy Joel, but they did not have the Jason Isbell or the U2. So Lindsay picked me up the Warren Zevon for myself, because there was nothing there she wanted. So she got the Warren Zevon for me, and then I got the Pearl Jam, and they did have the Billy Joel, but again, I was like, if I go back of the line, the line's still out the door. It's going to take me another hour to get to the front of the line again, and if I do, the Billy Joel I want might be sold out because there's only two copies left. So I'm like, screw it, I'm not going to risk it. And so I called you and I said, hey, I was able to get the Pearl Jam and Zevon, but I'm like, I did not find the Isbell. So I'm like, if you can buy me the Isbell and then, I'll pay you back and you can ship it to me, that'd be great. So that's what ended up happening. Thankfully, you were, nice enough to hang around until I saw what my store had. And then you picked me up the Isbell. So it worked out for me in a sense, even though I struck out. We both kind of struck out because you didn't get the one you wanted the most. And then I wasn't able to get the Billy Joel, and then you had to get me the Isbell. So it kind of worked out in the end, but you ended up still getting the Scott album. Do you want to tell them what happened after?
Yeah, so I was really bummed because I was really looking forward to it, and especially because I'm trying to get back into vinyl. I wanted to get something that was like, like an all me record, an artist I got into myself, an exclusive from it, first pressing. Like I just really wanted to get into the fun of it. Um, the not so fun part was, ordering it online. You had actually really helped. You found a website that was going to, at what, like 8 in the morning or something, was going to allow online shopping for any remaining copies. And that was looking good until the morning of, and they didn't have any copies left. So we had to go secondhand. Um, and it was still cool. Waiting in the mail a couple days, kind of where there was some
You
anticipation.
got it
So,
pretty quick, actually. You got it faster than I thought. You got it like what, barely a week later?
oh yeah, because I think it said 3 to 5 days, and it definitely was within that window. So I was like, oh cool, it shipped fast. It was shipped well. Like they shipped it between two empty like old record sleeves. So I have no complaints about getting it and stuff. And I spun it yesterday. I actually didn't even quite finish it because I had to do some stuff, but it sounds great. They look really nice. My only complaint is that the actual um like the gatefold and whatnot is not very sturdy. Like I almost kind of started bending part of it, crimping it on accident. But that doesn't really bother me. But yeah, so it worked out like you were saying. Maybe not as planned, maybe not quite as hype as I had maybe hoped, but it was a fun day. It was
Yeah, because
cool.
I will say the downside of Record Store Day is that over the last couple of years, especially, it has become kind of a cash grab for certain bands or even record stores because what'll happen is some bands will release an item only for Record Store Day and they only make a certain amount of copies. Like I think the Scott album that you bought was limited to I think like maybe it said some website said it was limited to 4,000 copies. One other website said 8,000. Either way, that's still a small amount compared to albums today when they get released. There's tons of copies made and copies are still being made today. Like you can, they're still pressing copies of like Thriller and Dark Side of the Moon because those are two of the most popular albums people buy nowadays. Um, but these Record Store Day exclusive records, they only make so many copies. And sometimes they will release them after Record Store Day, like the band's website will sell them, but sometimes they don't. So I know a couple years ago, Tom Petty, before he passed away, they did a Record Store Day, like a live album. And it was only like maybe 6 or 7 songs. Like it was almost like a live EP, I would say. But I missed buying it because I think that was before I had a job and I didn't have much money, so I didn't participate in Record Store Day. And nowadays, if I went to try to buy it on eBay or Discogs, it goes for like over $140 for like 6 songs.
Wow.
The problem is it's one of those albums that is not on streaming services or on CD because it was only made on vinyl. Same thing with the Foo Fighters covers album that they released many years ago, a Medium Rare. You can't stream that on Spotify or Apple Music. Like, you have to have the vinyl of it. So, and Jason Isbell also did I think maybe a covers EP or a live album, some years ago. And I missed buying that. And that one's also very expensive to find. But not every Record Store Day item is like that. Like you said, you found the Harold and Maude soundtrack from last year or maybe the year before.
And I
And
also
and it was
when
like
you were up in
same
town,
price.
yeah, it actually was like the same price, which was cool. When you were up in town, I got another one from a previous record store day, the Dead Milkman's Metaphysical Graffiti, and it came with like a Methodist coloring book, which is one of the songs on there, as well as it had a single that included all the interludes throughout the album, and so it was pretty cool actually. So I've been getting a lot of record store day releases, I guess.
Yeah, because they're not always like super exclusive or hard to get afterwards. That's why
Right.
you have to kind of like know the market and do some research online. Like your Scott album, I think it doesn't sound like they were going to make any more copies. So it's only going to get more expensive over time. I might be wrong. Who knows? Maybe in the next year he'll re-release it again and you would have been able to buy it for like only, $40, which is still, I would say, a good amount for a record. But um I didn't want you to take those chances, you know? So I was like, rather you spend an extra 20, $30 on it now than have to spend an extra $100 on it down the road because you really want it and they're not going to re-release it. So it's like, I really like some extra day exclusive items, you know, like I know a couple years ago, Harry Nielsen, they re-released his album Nielsen Smielsen, which is an album Tony and I will talk about down the road because we
We
love it.
have to.
Yeah, it'll be on an episode, but they did like a reissue of it on a half yellow, half white record, like a
Yeah,
split
I
color.
got that one too.
Yeah, and it's not the best sounding record I have, but it definitely sounded better than the copy I had before. And that's one that like you can still buy nowadays, like for normal price, 20, $30. But there are some exclusive record store day items that are hard to find now, and are people just make them too expensive online. You know, people will go to record store day and they'll buy 20 copies of the Taylor Swift album and then flip them for like twice the price online because they know people will pay that if they really want it. So in that regard, I don't like record store day because to me it should be about the music. And sometimes the music, like sometimes it's not always the most interesting release. Like sometimes it is like just B-sides, or sometimes it's a live album. Some people when it comes to record stores, or not record stores, when it comes to record collecting, they don't like live albums. They just want studio albums. So, or people don't care about a covers album from a band. So in that sense, sometimes the music isn't always the most exciting, but it's usually always fun. And usually I don't mind spending some money on fun releases, but not if they're going to be so hard to find afterwards, and not if they're going to be so expensive.
Right, unless it's like a record you really care about, or like that's like you're saying they probably won't do more pressings of the Scott record, at least not anytime soon. And there's no way to get a record version on vinyl.
Yeah, and that's kind of the same thing with the Warren Zevon. Like it on the little sticker on the album, it made it seem like it was only record store day exclusive, and they did reissue the album like maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, but it was also released on a limited run. So it's like I don't know. I hate when if it's a normal studio album, I hate when a record label just doesn't release it for the public to buy. Like I hate when it's a limited release. I hate it. Like it's cool if you buy it and then you can say, "Oh, I have one of the only 5,000 copies," but I don't think it should be that limited. I think everyone should be able to buy one if they want it.
Yeah, I mean,
Because like I have
sometimes
a
the rarity is cool because then you're like, oh well, I have this, but at the same time, then you're kind of not alienating other fans, but kind of excluding them, gatekeeping as they say these days.
yeah, and it's like I said, it is cool to like be able to like, for example, I have when Ben Folds reissued Rock in the Suburbs, his first studio album on vinyl, like I don't know, 7, 8 years ago. He did a normal black copy, black colored version, but then he did a awesome yellow vinyl version of it. And I don't know if this is true because sometimes they kind of fudge the numbers, but it says it was exclusive to only 200 copies.
Wow.
But I missed out on it buying it when it was first released, and I bought it a week later on eBay for like 3 times the price. But I had to because it's like it's probably my top 20 albums of all time. And
Rock in the Suburbs is?
yeah,
Jesus.
and
Well, we'll
it's
probably
not,
talk about that someday then here on the
yeah,
podcast.
yeah, it's my favorite Ben Folds release. But um, yellow is my favorite color too, and it's like a nice like it's not like a translucent yellow, like it's like solid yellow, and it's kind of like a really vibrant, bright yellow, which I love. So,
That's
um,
cool.
but normally I don't normally do that. Normally I just buy the cheapest version or the version that's supposed to sound the best. I usually am not in it for like the color of the vinyl or how exclusive it is or how rare it is, but to me it's always about the music. But every now and then you see a release that looks cool and you're like, I just have to.
Yeah, I know with the ones I was looking at, a lot of them were colored. And just to clarify, I'm kind of with Rico. I used to like colors more when I was younger because it's like, whoa, this is so cool. Because it is cool and it's fun, but you know, if it looks cool but it sounds like shit, then I could take it or leave it then.
So what else? Just out of curiosity, because the only thing I only bought two records that day, the Pearl Jam and the Warren Zevon. I mostly because right now I'm trying not to spend as much money, especially on records. I didn't go through the rest of the collection, like my store's normal inventory. But what else did you get? Because I didn't even know you got that soundtrack. So I know you got the Pearl Jam. What else did you get that day besides the Isbell for me?
I think that actually might have been it. I feel like I got one more thing, but no. I I got a Freddie Fender record for Dad just because it looks like him. It was 99 cents.
Oh,
But I will say though, actually, Steven, he had a duplicate copy of one of the B-52 records, the one with Rock Lobster. So he gave me one. So that was pretty sick. Um, but no, I think I ended up just getting the Pearl Jam and the Harold and Maude thing. Cat Stevens. And I know the Pearl Jam one was a little more on the pricey side.
it's worth it though. I know you haven't listened to it yet, but it is worth it. Sound quality is great. Set list is pretty good. I mean, back then they only had 5 albums, so like there's no binaural or riot act songs on it. But
Which is my favorites.
I know, but Jack Iron sounds great on the drums. That version of In My Tree is unfortunately, better than any version that Matt's done with the band. For some reason, I just don't like his playing on In My Tree. But
And the thing about Matt is that he's one of my absolute favorite drummers, and I love what he does at Soundgarden, and I like the songs he writes for Pearl Jam. But sometimes when he plays covers, I'm not sure if it's just because he's not trying to emulate perfectly the record, or if maybe he just doesn't want to step on toes or something. But sometimes it feels like he just kind of holds back, or I don't know. I don't know. But
it's
that's
hard
why
to
it's fun listening to different lineups of bands.
yeah, so that's a very fun record to listen to, especially if you like a lot of Yield songs, because I think like half the songs on Yield are on that Pearl Jam release. And it's good quality. It's a nice heavy. I think it's probably 180 grams. So
I will say though that I mean, because of course I looked at the track listing and you read it to me before I even got it. I do not like that they open with Release and that they close with Immortality.
well,
Not to get on a tangent there.
opening with Release is something they do all the time. So, and actually, it's a lot of people's favorite opener. I know, I love it as an opener because uh, closing an album with a ballad like Release, and even though I wouldn't necessarily call it a ballad, but a slower song, that's hard to put in a set list. But when Pearl Jam do it at the beginning of a show, it's kind of like a warm up, and then usually the next song that follows it is like a banger, like a fast rock song. Because if you were to play Release somewhere else in the set list, I feel like it would drag the show down too much. Now, ending
I
with
guess.
Immortality is not. I don't. I think the concert itself they took out a couple songs because I don't think it would fit on a normal 2 LP. They would have had to do 3 LPs.
Or maybe it wasn't maybe it wasn't one of their best performances for some of those songs. Who knows?
Yeah, but they did take out a couple songs. Like I think Wishlist was one they removed and whatnot. But so I don't know if the actual show closed with Immortality, but the vinyl does. And yeah, Immortality is actually it's a hot take. It's not it's like one of my least favorite Pearl Jam songs. Um and closing a show, or at least closing a vinyl, record version of it with Immortality is not my favorite, but that's yeah, we're on a very much of a tangent. But yeah, so but I had fun overall. It wasn't my most successful year. And I know it, wasn't super successful for you because you didn't get the one record you wanted. But I will say this: I think next year I might actually plan my trip to Washington more in the middle of April, and I might actually try to be there for Record Store Day so that you and I can both go to Silver Platters together. Because my record store is just not a good one to go to for Record Store Day. I've decided.
Yeah, it doesn't sound good. That sounded like a
No,
pretty awful
I'd
experience.
much rather go to like a bigger store like Amoeba, but then that's like way too big and the line's even twice as long. So Silver Platter seems like a good sized store to go to for Record Store Day. So next year I might actually try to be in town for Record Store Days. We can go together because it usually it's more fun than it was this year. Normally you find the releases you want, and then especially if it's a year where you only want one or two releases, you have extra money to go and look at the store's normal inventory and buy other records that aren't exclusive to Record Store Day.
Which is still fun, yeah.
Yeah,
You
because
know,
I
it,
like going through it. I like going through like every artist that I like and trying to see if there's records that I don't already own. instead of just looking at new releases.
Right. Oh yeah, like I almost got the police's synchronicity when I was there, but I was like, nah, I'll get the Herald and Mod first. But yeah, for first record store day, it was fun. I had a good day, like, even just beyond being at the record store. So it will be it's a good memory. It'll be interesting to see what next year's like. And even
Yeah.
though like there's probably like, like maybe like five exclusives that, I was browsing at, looking at. Who knows? Maybe next year it'll be more or less, or maybe they'll be easier to get.
Yeah, and
All
maybe
in
next year
time.
we'll do maybe we'll do an episode before Record Store Day going over the list,
Okay, yeah.
discussing releases. And if I am there in town next year for Record Store Day, maybe we'll do like a live vlog or something, to kind of, you know, um do, like a recording of our experiences.
Right. We should do something fun with it.
Yeah.
It's a
So
holiday. God damn it.
it pretty much is. But yeah, I had fun, and I think maybe not the most successful one, but it was still fun. So,
Yeah, and
but
that's part of the fun about going. Like I, it's easy to order stuff from Amazon, and you can get, you can find what you're looking for. But I actually kind of really do like the hunt of record. Oh, does my record store, do they have this police record this time? Like that's kind of part of the thrill of it. Um, it's
and
the
it,
experience.
and it is good to support local record stores and not just give our money to Jeff Bezos,
You got a point. You got a point.
even though it is more convenient most of the time. So,
Right. At my doorstep in 2 days? What?
although sometimes some people got really unlucky with Amazon shipping, and their record will come like bent or even broken because they didn't put it in a
What?
proper mailing package for records.
Oh, like the little box things.
Yes, yeah. So, and then sometimes the Amazon drivers like throw it on the ground, and yeah, it gets warped, and yeah. So another reason why it's always like better to get it at the store. It's more if as long as it looks fine and you're grabbing it at the store, it should be fine when you go home and open it.
Right.
But for the most part, I've never had bad luck with Amazon when it comes to ordering records, except for, and it'll be the last little thing. A couple months ago, I was trying to buy a Bruce Springsteen album on Amazon. And when I got in the mail, I opened it up. It was the freaking soundtrack to the new Elvis movie. They just sent me the completely wrong record. I've never had that happen before. So I had to do a return. And then thankfully the next week they sent me the right Bruce album. But I had to go to my local UPS store and mail it back to them because they gave me the wrong record. And
Wow.
even though I watched and didn't mind the new Elvis movie, I just didn't want the soundtrack because it was mostly just a bunch of modern artists covering Elvis songs that didn't interest me. So
And it's kind of crazy too that it wasn't like a different Bruce record, or it wasn't like Rick
yeah,
Springfield or something close.
I don't know how they messed that up.
That's hilarious, actually, though.
I guess it happens to people all the time, but I've just never had it happen to me. So again, another reason to support your local record store. But I think that's it for this episode. We just wanted to kind of, give our recap of our record store day, and yeah, we'll be back next week. We Tony and I realized this month of May, there's an extra week. So there'll be an extra episode this month. So him and I are still kind of planning what they're going to be, but we will be back next week with a new episode. So until then, we hope everyone takes care, and we'll see you soon. Bye.